Previously on the Poppy Day Bomb.
The IRA discussed what was the acceptable limit of civilian deaths or casualties that could be tolerated.
He says fairly definitively that man doesn't want to be found. We've seen a draft police report.
I met a man who was wearing a darkish pinstripe suit and had a limp.
There is another police officer, and he also observes suspected terrorists who he knew by name entering and coming out of the reading rooms. I've been thinking about ghosts a lot recently. Close to where I grew up in Enniskillen, there was an old dilapidated farmhouse up on a hill. Feeling adventurous one day, when I was still in primary school, my mates and I decided to check it out. We climbed over a fence, and there it was. Stone walls, plants creeping through what were once windows, any sign of life, a distant memory. Then one of the lads said he'd heard the place was haunted by ghosts. Obviously I laughed it off, showed no fear. But I didn't go inside the house. And that night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the thought of the place. In the years after, I'd still think about those ghosts any time I looked up at that house. I knew they weren't real, but my steps still quickened as I passed the hill. Sometimes I'd look over my shoulder, checking for what? I don't know. That was 30-odd years ago, and until recently, I'd forgotten all about it. But since I've been working on this story, that sense of haunting has returned. This time, they're figures who know, or might know, something about the Poppy Day bombing. They seem to come into view, holding secrets, answers to questions. Will they tell me? Then they slip away, just out of reach. But unlike when I was a little boy, some of those ghosts are starting to become very real. You're listening to the Poppy Day Bomb, a podcast series from the Times and Sunday Times, with me, Mario Ledwith. This is Part 4, The Dirty War. At times, I felt like the Enniskillen bomb has become little more than a grim marker in Northern Ireland's troubles. The death of 12 people and the injuring of dozens more is often cited as one of the most appalling incidents from the conflict. When I started this investigation, I was genuinely hopeful of finding some answers. Yet to do that, I had to tackle a total void of information. There are so few leads to grab hold of. We now know that by the 1980s, the British state's counter-terrorism strategy in Northern Ireland was led by intelligence. What were the police, the army and MI5 up to? What did they know? And could their activities have even hindered the search for the truth? During the Troubles, the size of Northern Ireland's police force more than doubled as violence erupted in the region. Key to this policing response was the growth of the RUC's special branch, the force's secretive intelligence unit. It sought to prevent terrorism by running agents and informers in paramilitary groups. Naturally, most of its resources were focused on the IRA. The police were supported by thousands of army troops during the Troubles, in what was the British Army's longest ever deployment. The army was also involved in the intelligence game, through the Force Research Unit. This intelligence work was all overseen by MI5, and it was effective. Agents and informers became the state's greatest asset. At one point, 1 in 4 IRA members were said to be passing information to the British. Yet it was a murky and dangerous business, with deceit and betrayal on all sides. It became known as the Dirty War. So what was going on in Fermanagh? As the world recoiled at the horror of the IRA's attack on Enniskillen, questions were immediately being asked.
I wasn't due to go to Enniskillen, I was due to go to Belfast. But because the incident allowed a very small window of opportunity to try and understand what had occurred and who'd been involved in it.
This is Ian Hurst. He used to work for the Force Research Unit, the FRU, part of the British military. Ian joined the Army's Intelligence Corps in 1980 and was soon sent to Northern Ireland. And just weeks after the Poppy Day bomb, Ian was posted to Enniskillen. He was working as a handler. His job was to find and manage agents.
We had you might describe as a poor coverage within that area, and there had been no recruitments of agents for a number of years. There were agents on the books, but they weren't of the quality you'd really would want. And we looked to see if we could exploit that situation, and I ended up staying for 3 and a bit years there.
Ian's a controversial figure himself. In 1999, he became a whistleblower, exposing some of his unit's activities, and subsequently he co-wrote a book about the most notorious double agent of the Troubles. Now in his 60s, Ian is talking to me from his office in the northwest of England. And why was there such poor coverage, as you put it, in the area?
For a number of reasons, but predominantly because there was very little activity within the areas. Operating in a rural environment is completely different than, say, Derry. We had cracking coverage in Derry, as the IUC did. As in Belfast, in rural areas, people are different. They don't have the same allegiances. You have family units. There's very little friction between those people that you can exploit. So it's much more difficult as a handler.
At around the same time as you arrived in Enniskillen, Margaret Thatcher travelled to the town and said that no stone would be left unturned in the investigation into the Enniskillen bombing. So, as part of your job, are you trying to solve and understand what's happened, or are you doing something different?
No, that's our job. The intelligence community, had no advance notice of that incident, and very shortly after the bombing, there was an instruction to the special units as to what did we need in regards to being more effective. And we were told, there was no budget limit. And that's exactly what happened. Very shortly after, within the next 6 to 9 months, we got a phenomenal increase. We got the boots and whistles of everything which was being requested, which brought us from a First Division side through into the Premier League.
Can I ask what you did come to find out about the Enniskillen bombing?
Next to nothing.
None of it resulted in more intelligence about Enniskillen?
It did result in more intelligence, yes it did, but none specifically on the Enniskillen bomb.
And why do you think so little was known about what happened, given the enormity of the incident?
I can't think of any other incident in the Troubles, north or south, which had a dearth of intelligence, real intelligence, which is corroborated. So you want one or more sources reporting on and giving corroboration or dismissing, So I genuinely and honestly have no idea as to why there was such a dearth of intelligence.
You mentioned, Ian, that there were some agents in the area, albeit that the coverage was poor. To the best of your knowledge, are you confident that the British authorities had no forewarning about the Enniskillen attack?
Yeah, absolutely.
When you said that after all of this effort and attention on Enniskillen and Fermanagh, there was still little information in the intelligence files, why do you think that was the case?
Genuinely, I can't account for it. I find it difficult to understand why that would happen, given the level of coverage we had at senior levels within the Republican movement, why there was no definitive position. There was nobody who had the smoking gun in regards to who knew what, where, when and how. And I've never seen that before.
And you would have expected that information to come in at some stage?
Well, over the years, yeah. I mean, every other incident has had almost clarity within 6 to 9 months. And I can't account for that.
And you have no idea why that might have been the case?
No.
This fits with what one former detective told me. When he opened the files to reinvestigate the Enniskillen bombing years later, he was shocked at just how little intelligence there was. Those ghosts again. One of the most notable events of the Troubles, yet nothing substantial enough to get hold of. In 2018, one of the most peculiar stories surrounding Enniskillen became public. It revolved around a letter. Now, this is a bit of a detour, but it's important for you to know, because it's what can and does happen where for years there are no answers and a vacuum is created. In 2018, an article appeared in the Irish Times headlined, "Anonymous letter claimed British knew of Enniskillen bomb plans." The letter was received by the Irish Foreign Minister just 6 days after the bomb. But it only came to light 30 years later, when documents from the Irish National Archives were made public. The author claimed to be an MI5 agent who was fearful for their life and was sending the letter as a matter of conscience. In the letter was this astonishing claim. The author wrote, "Our section decided to change the timing device and let the explosion take place so that the IRA would score an own goal and create a massive backlash against itself." It's saying the British intelligence services knew about the bomb and chose to allow it to happen and also tampered with the bomb's timer. Towards the end of the letter, the writer adds, "I'm not even sure now that I am doing the right thing, but I feel I must do something to make people aware of what is happening and get it stopped." I asked Ian what he thought of the letter.
It's not signed, it's making allegations. It literally is not worth the paper it's written on. The individual claims to be a member of the security services. You could have drafted that, I could have drafted that. I'd have to see a little bit more substance from that source to be able to corroborate that. If it was the state doing it, what would they be gaining? And what is in it for them?
One of the biggest issues for Ian in whether the author is genuine or not is that he says it lacks insight into how MI5 worked. Ian says back in 1987, MI5 would not have done this alleged operation without the assistance of either the Force Research Unit, which Ian was a part of, or 14 Intelligence Company, which was another part of the British Army, much like Ian's unit.
It wouldn't have been their operation to have been involved in. Now, if he'd have made reference to them using either 14 Company, but to make the allegation that it was a security service operation planned and executed without either the FRU, 14 Company, it's fucking weird.
I've spoken to a former senior special branch officer who also doesn't believe the letter is genuine. In their view, while MI5 did have technical experts, it was unthinkable that they would tamper with a bomb to do anything other than deactivate it. We now know that the security services in Northern Ireland used controversial tactics, but this could well have been a piece of black propaganda from an IRA sympathiser trying to shift the blame. What I do know is that when this letter came to light in 2018, 31 years after the bombing, and with no one held to account, it triggered more anguish, confusion, and questions for many of the families. Now, there was something else I wanted to ask Ian Hurst. That reported sighting we heard about in episode 3 of a man with a limp and a pinstripe suit in the reading rooms the night before the bomb. I know whoever was ID'd wasn't arrested, but it's such a distinctive description that I've been asking around contacts in Enniskillen people who were there in the late 80s, as well as investigators. And now, I think I know who it is. I've been given a name by multiple sources, and although I can't say it here for legal reasons, I put it to Ian. I've come across a man who was described in police reports as wearing a darkish pinstripe suit and who had a prominent limp. And he was seen on the night before the bombing in the reading rooms carrying a bag. Do you know who that individual might be?
No.
I think he might be a man known as... See somebody that crossed your radar?
Yeah.
Did you ever speak to him?
Yes.
Anything you recall from those conversations with him?
No, he was one amongst quite a lot of people who we would target.
How would you describe him?
Low-level operator.
Within the IRA?
Loosely, yeah.
What do you mean by loosely, Ian?
I would describe people of his ilk as gophers.
And what did people like that do?
The running around, take the risks, but I can put my hand on my heart and I say to you that I've never seen his name in the context of the Enniskillen bomb.
But a police report has a witness putting an unnamed man with a prominent limp at the scene of the bomb on the night before.
Yeah.
Wouldn't he at least be somebody of interest for questioning to try and get an insight into what had happened?
Do you think the police may have interviewed him? Is there a police report?
Do you know if the police interviewed him?
I don't.
There have been accusations that the intelligence community
so this is the night before.
This is the night before, yeah.
And forensically, have you aligned that with the report of where the seat of the bombing was?
I mean, he's placed in the building.
Well, yeah, but we'll know where the seat of the bombing is, because forensically we'll be... So do the two marry? Would he have access to where that was? And these are the things that need to be teased out, but that's a criminal action, isn't it? So that's dealt with by the police.
Yeah.
So I can genuinely, honestly tell you now, if they'd have had one scintilla of evidence against he'd be banged up. He is a distinctive person. He's got a limp. Yeah, that's not how this world works. You build a picture based upon whether somebody is reliable and whether you're telling me the truth or not. So I can rule you in or rule you out, basically taking your information at face value and then seeking corroboration. So you saw him. Where did you see him? How did you see him? Who was he with? What was he wearing? And then you've got the opportunity of seeking to go and get corroboration. And I don't personally believe would be involved in this operation. But that's my personal opinion based from my experience of that individual. But again, I don't have a crystal ball and I may well be wrong.
I wish I could answer Ian's questions about the police investigation, but I can't. In his opinion, Ian doubts the sighting is significant. But there is something else that makes me want to keep following this lead. Remember the witness who'd originally reported seeing a man with a limp who was later considered unreliable and had memory problems? Well, despite that, I've spoken to a former detective involved in that historical review. The same one who was shocked by how little was in the files was interested enough in this man that he wanted to interview him in around 2011. He said he'd highlighted the man with a limp as a key line of inquiry due to the alleged sighting and other leads, but the detective said that when he told senior officers, he was met with a wall of resistance. He told me they became nervous. At one meeting, his questions were stonewalled. He says it stank. Before long, the former detective, who claims he was already in conflict with his bosses about the approach being taken by the unit, was moved off the Enniskillen case. I'm not sure what to make of that. In trying to solve the mystery of the Poppy Day bomb, why wouldn't the authorities want the man with the limp to be questioned? I asked the police, but they said they're prohibited by law from commencing or continuing any troubles-related criminal investigations, and that the Independent Commission for Reconciliation and Information Recovery is the only body with the power to review the deaths at Enniskillen. Therefore, they added, we need to be mindful we do not say or do anything that could compromise a future case. But I really want to speak to the man with the limp myself. Might he hold the key to the Poppy Day bomb? None of my contacts in Enniskillen had any idea where he is now. The man doesn't seem to have been in Fermanagh for about 25 years. It feels as though he's one of the ghosts in this investigation, just out of reach. But I did find someone who once knew him intimately.
Could I have a quick chat with her? Is she in the house? My name's Mario Ledwith. I was just hoping to have a wee quick word with her.
The man's former wife. It was an acrimonious split, so I wasn't sure if she'd want to speak to me.
She won't be expecting me, but I'm happy just to... I'm very sorry to bother you. My name's Mario Ledwith. We've never spoken before. I'm a reporter with the Times newspaper. I'm from Enniskillen. I was just wondering if you had 2 minutes just to tell you something I'm looking into, and I was wondering if you might be able to help me out.
Sorry.
Aye, that's all right, she says, and invites me in. We're not naming her. She sits on a couch opposite me, in the same home she shared with her ex-husband. The TV was on, smoking a cigarette as we talk. He was working locally when she got to know him.
We started chatting and just went from there. It was nothing serious to begin with, and then started to get serious.
That was in the 1980s?
It would have been around the 1980s.
And you eventually got married?
Married. I was sort of confused whether to go ahead with it or not, but I didn't want to say no. Everyone there, because he wasn't the person he came across to be at the beginning.
What sort of person was he?
He was sort of always out. There was something wasn't right.
Did your ex-husband have a disability of any sort?
Just limp.
So he used to walk with a limp?
Yeah.
She went on to say that he was getting involved with a Republican crowd, regularly going to a town called Bundoran just over the border in the county of Donegal. It was known for its IRA connections.
He started going up and down to Bundoran, and then he started going out at night, maybe not coming back for 2 days.
And whenever he was going missing for a couple of nights, would you ever ask him where he was?
Oh, he'd say I was at a friend's, and then he'd say I was down at a meeting in Bundoran.
When he said he was at a meeting, you knew this was the IRA?
Yeah.
And in terms of the time around the Enniskillen bomb, you don't remember what he was up to the night before, or you don't remember any of that?
He wasn't here at the Enniskillen when he left, and he didn't come back to the next morning, about 7.
The night before he wasn't in the house?
No.
And what happened the next morning?
I swear I had a meeting.
And what did you think he meant by meeting?
That's what sort of meeting I had down in Bundoran, but I knew there was more.
And did you ever think when the bomb went off, oh, he could have been involved, or he might have?
It's the first thing came into my head.
It's the first thing that came into my head, she says. Now, I have to bear in mind that there has since been a very bitter split with her now ex-husband, which might colour her judgment. But I wanted to check something else. The unnamed man reportedly seen in the reading rooms at 9 p.m. the night before the bomb was described as wearing a darkish pinstriped suit.
Possibly a strange question, but did your ex-husband ever wear a suit?
I would have had a black suit.
And what sort of suit was it? Do you remember what it looked like, or?
I don't know, I think it was like a stripe.
So the suit that he had a stripe, a kind of pinstripe?
Yeah.
That kind of look?
Mm-hmm.
The reason I asked that is because there was a report came out a few years ago about the Enniskillen bomb, and it was reported in the front page of the local newspaper here, and it had a headline about a man in a pinstripe suit with a limp being seen the night before around the reading rooms, you know, in beside the War Memorial in Enniskillen. Did you see that news article at the time, or do you remember reading about it?
I'll tell you, I never really watched the news. My father brought us up. You weren't allowed to watch the news, you know.
You never heard that story about the man with the pinstripe suit, or nobody ever mentioned it to you or anything like that? Okay.
So her ex-husband fits the description and did own a pinstripe suit. Now, I found out something else about this man while working on this podcast series. After the historic peace agreement in 1998, not all paramilitaries wanted to end the violence. In November 2000, a dissident Republican group called the Real IRA were planning an attack. Their aim was to blow up a police station or security building in Fermanagh using homemade explosives. The plot was foiled and 4 men were arrested. I was shocked to discover that one of them was the man with the limp. Not only that, he was never charged. But when the case went to court, the 3 others were convicted and given lengthy sentences. By this time, the man with the limp had disappeared from Northern Ireland. Security contacts have told me that's because he was working as an informer. And he was passing information to the Special Branch, the police intelligence unit. The Real IRA became suspicious of him, believing that he was what they call a tout. So I've been told he left Northern Ireland around 25 years ago and has been living under a new identity in another part of the UK. And that's why I couldn't find him. His ex-wife says she hasn't seen him since then either and doesn't know where he now lives.
He was working for Special Branch, and that might be why he got out of the country.
Yeah, and got his name changed.
After he disappeared, you were contacted by a man who said he wanted to meet you as well. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
At this time, his brother was in jail, and he says, all we want to know is where he is.
It's hard to follow some of this, but she says that the brother of one of the Real IRA men convicted of the bomb plot came to see her. He was asking where her ex-husband was.
The brother of one of the guys who's jailed comes down to you and says, we want to find your ex-husband.
Yeah, I told him I didn't know, and I didn't know.
So the Real IRA were convinced that her ex-husband was a tout working for Special Branch. If he was the man with the limp spotted in the reading rooms, that would mean that the police had recruited someone who was, at least at one stage, a person of interest in the Poppy Day bombing. The bomb which killed 12 people and injured dozens more. While I've been told by several people that he became an informer and was active in IRA circles for many years, what I don't know is when he was recruited. No one has suggested it was before the Enniskillen bombing in November 1987, but that was what I needed to ask his then wife.
To the best of your knowledge, looking back now, when do you think your husband at the time might have started working with Special Branch?
For all I know, we could have been with him before I married him. I don't know. I haven't a clue.
I asked the police service of Northern Ireland if the man was an informer, and if so, when he was recruited, but they wouldn't comment. So, intelligence from an informant may have helped foil a Real IRA bomb plot in 2000, but it might also explain why the detective reinvestigating the Poppy Day bomb wasn't allowed to interview a person of interest. By that time, the man with the limp was quite possibly under state protection. Surely if getting to the truth about the bomb was a priority for the police, then officers should have been allowed to ask this man what he knew. By stopping that line of inquiry, aren't officials hampering the search for the truth? But I've kept looking for this man myself. It's taken a lot of digging over many months, going through records, following breadcrumbs I've picked up along the way. Then, one day, it clicks. I think I know where he is. So I'm just driving along what looks like a suburban street in any part of the country. Fairly early on in the investigation, we came across a police report which mentioned a guy with a limp and a pinstriped suit who was supposedly seen in the reading rooms the night before the Enniskillen bombing. My search for the man with the limp has brought me and series producer Will to mainland Britain. That's all I'm going to say, so we don't give anything away. We're just about a few minutes away from the property.
Where are we? Is this the road? Yeah, I think we're coming back up the road.
I am intrigued to see what the reception's going to be. If he is living a kind of new life with a new name, this might not be the kind of thing that he's been asked about in some time, so we shall see. We soon found ourselves outside a front door. I knock. It opened and someone answered. Hello, I was hoping to speak to Mr. My name's Mario Ledwith, I'm a journalist. I was told he wasn't in. You don't know if there's a time later on to come back? I didn't want to leave a message and asked about coming back later. I just want to speak to him directly about it, if that's okay. Will he be back in an hour or two, do you know? I was told that he would be. Brilliant, thanks a million, cheers. Confirmed that he lives there. Yeah. Good. We left, pretty sure it was the right house. We pulled up again a few hours later.
So Mario, we've just got back. As luck would have it, we've actually just seen the man with the limp go into the property, so we know he's there.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary. We've just driven past the house. We could see a man with a very distinctive limp walking into the house. As sure as I can be that that's the guy. So just gonna go and get parked up and go and speak to him. We headed over to the house. I didn't want to miss my chance to ask him what, if anything, he knew about the bombing of Enniskillen. In this investigation, it's been incredibly hard to find people willing to talk, even off the record. So to have tracked down a man linked to the local IRA, reportedly seen in the reading rooms the night before, well, it felt quite a moment. But what happened next was one of the strangest things I've ever encountered as a journalist. It was just after 5 in the afternoon on a sunny day. Will and I walked towards the house, and there he was facing us, in the front garden, no more than a few yards away. But he was on his phone, so we waited and I indicated to him that I'd like to talk. He seemed unperturbed and, while still on the phone, he said, "Who are you?" I told him I was a journalist and I handed him a card. He signalled he'd be with me shortly, but he stayed on the phone. A few moments later, he again signalled he'd be with me in a moment, but then he went inside and shut the front door. I waited a short distance from the house for him to come back out, but nothing happened. I knocked on the door, but there was no reply or movement. So we turned to leave, and just at that moment,
Do you think?
2 police officers got out of the car and asked us what we were doing. We explained we were journalists wanting to speak to the man at the property. I could only think that he'd called them.
We're both journalists who work for the Times.
The police would not say why they'd been called.
Can I ask officers what the problem appears to be? If there's anything you can tell us about what the issue is so that we don't repeat it or anything like that.
Shortly after, Will and I got back in the car. That was really quite unusual. Yeah, I'm not sure what to think. I mean, the guy that we wanted to speak to was out in a garden, kept putting his finger up saying, "I'll be with you in a minute, guys," smiling, saying, "How you do?" Like, "I'll be with you in a second, lads, no worries." It wasn't spoken, but it was intimated, like,
Yeah.
perfectly friendly. And
he went in the house and he just didn't come out. Next thing you know, police car turns up with the sirens on, and very strangely, they didn't really tell us what the problem was. They basically said, "What's happened?"
Has that ever happened to you on a door knock before?
No, never. And actually, one of the police officers asked the same question. I explained the same to him. No, never.
Never.
Was the man scared that we weren't really journalists? Perhaps the real IRA? I contacted the police force the next day to ask why we'd been moved on. They wouldn't say. But they did apologise and said they'd remind officers that it's up to individuals to let journalists know if they don't want to be interviewed, and that this wasn't a police matter. I contacted the man with the limp, and asked him for an interview. He never got back to me. I followed up with some questions. I asked him if he'd been an informant working for the special branch, and if this is why he left the country. I also asked if he had any involvement in the Poppy Day bomb, and if he was on the British state payroll as an informant at that time. He never responded. I asked the British government whether lines of inquiry in the investigation into the Poppy Day bombing had been blocked. They said that the only body who can review cases from this period is the Independent Commission for Reconciliation and Information Recovery. So, does this bring me any closer to understanding who was behind the Poppy Day bombing? It was hugely frustrating not to find out more, to be within reach of one of those ghosts, who then vanished. But I do believe this ghost was at least a person of interest to investigators over in Enniskillen, and later an informant for Special Branch. And if that man left Northern Ireland after his cover was blown, and at least one detective reinvestigating the case wasn't able to talk to him, that worries me, because it means that the intelligence services may themselves have hindered the search for the truth. And what if that wasn't the only time that a line of inquiry was stopped? Back in 1987, on the Thursday before Remembrance Sunday, police stopped a car on a road in rural Ireland. In it were 4 men, all alleged members of the IRA. It's believed they were headed for a briefing on the terror attack that would take place in Enniskillen. Years later, one of those men would be celebrated around the world as a peacemaker, but on that day, he was one of the most important commanders in the paramilitary group. His name was Martin McGuinness. That's next time on the Poppy Day bomb. You've been listening to the Poppy Day bomb, a podcast series from the Times and Sunday Times, with me, Mario Ledwith. It's written by me and Will Rowe. The series producer is Will Rowe. The executive producer is Lynn Jones. Original music and sound design is by Tom Birchall. The commissioning editor is Kate Ford, and the head of podcasts at the Times is Dan Box. We are continuing to investigate this story and will report more if we get new leads. If you have any tips or information that you want to share with me or the team, you can email confidentially. You'll find contact details in the description notes.